I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Hope you had a great Canada Day, Stewart.
Oh, I sure did. A great family time.
We couldn't have had better weather. I think we had the best in the country in Vancouver.
That's for sure.
Stewart, people are wondering, especially in the business community, about how friendly the NDP Green government will be to natural resource development. What have you heard?
Well, I think at this point, there's a lot of people just wanting to know what the plans are. And there's maybe a little bit of skepticism. You're seeing, for example, the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade did a post-election survey. They found 76% of their members are less confident in the future of BC's economy because of, I think, not so much just the fact it's the NDP and Greens, it's the unknown factor. That's what's bugging a lot of people. You know, let's get to grips, figure out what the deal is, and then we can move forward. I'm also looking at a survey the Canadian Manufacturers Association is looking to its members to let them know what they think of the impact of cancelling sightsee if that happens, of having maybe less natural gas development, not having the Kinder Morgan pipeline. I mean, you're talking about $19 billion worth of projects, which, if they are scrapped, would take a big chunk out of the BC economy as it's currently expected to unfold. So you can see why there are these questions that businesses are raising.
Are you concerned that this will be a government that's driven by an agenda, or one that will look at what's best for everybody?
Well, you hope that any government that comes in after all of the rhetoric of an election is in the past can take a good hard look at the books and make the right decisions, because it doesn't matter what the government is, they still have to pay for hospitals and schools. They still got to achieve, whether it's balanced books or running the deficit, whatever they think they can sell to the public, they have to be able to pay for it all. And the hand that we're dealt in BC is very heavy on natural resources, doing it right, doing it sustainably over the long term. And that's one of the things that makes our quality of life really as good as it gets anywhere on the planet. If we didn't have that, we'd come down quite a few notches in terms of our prosperity. So that's not a political partisan choice. This is the way of life that we've got where we live. I'm
wondering if the NDP Greens are thinking that, okay, if we cancel the pipeline and Site C, we do plan to upgrade hospitals and improve transit in the Greater Vancouver area, and perhaps for Victoria as well. Would that offset cancellation of those major projects?
That's an interesting question, and I think one of the things I've seen in the research we've done at ResourceWorks is that there's a level of economic literacy that not just a lot of people who don't make economics their specialty, but even people in decision-making jobs, they should try to acquire if they can, because when you have an infrastructure project that allows us to create export revenue, that means jobs. It means we can pay for the things we need to import, whether it's iPhones or orange juice or CAT scanners or what have you. And then when it comes to things that you got to spend money on so that you have services for people, like a hospital, like a SkyTrain line, to some extent, you could argue that that's economically beneficial because it keeps people healthier, gets them to work, but it doesn't create direct export revenue the way that a pipeline does, or an LNG plant, or having low-cost electricity to let manufacturers make things in their factories at an affordable price. So these are very different. One's an expense, one's an investment in revenue. So when you see people comparing them as if you can either have a hospital or you can have a pipeline. One or the other. Oh, let's go with the hospital instead of the pipeline. It's just as good. Well, that's not even economics 101. That's I think something that anyone in high school, perhaps elementary school, should be able to say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Hospitals are good. We need more of them where we need them, but we've got to pay for them. And that's why we need pipelines, because crude oil, $120 billion in balance of trade export value over the last 3 years from crude oil exports, that more than pays for most of the things we've needed to export in the category of electronics and automobiles, things like that. And if we didn't have that, we either would not have those things, if you can imagine life without iPhones or Samsung phones, or we would be going into debt to pay for them.
Stewart, is this going to be a matter of trying to maybe educate the government about how important resource development is to keep BC's economy booming?
Well, yes, I think it's really important that we give some support to legislators, because they have the same problem that people in industry do, which is that there is often a disconnect, whether it's a rural-urban split where people who live in the countryside see things differently than city dwellers, or along other lines, people working in some kinds of industries or other kinds. They don't see eye to eye. But some of the economic facts really are just the facts. And if we can get those out, show that when we've got a good, healthy resource economy that's also sustainable, that over the long term will be there for us, that's not going to, damage the landscape and not result in us having that sense that we're treating the earth properly. If we can do these things, then we can succeed. And I think it doesn't matter what side of the House the legislators are sitting on, they still have those basic facts. And you think back to the 1990s, the NDP government in those times. I remember Mike Harcourt, when he was premier, he spent a lot of time in Europe, and he was trailed around by the Greenpeace protesters who didn't want there to be logging in parts of BC, and they made his life pretty miserable trying to go out there and tell a good story about BC. And then that these things aren't partisan in nature, and we're going to see the same thing here. We'll have an NDP government that at some point, one hopes, if they're around that long, because it's somewhat unstable chemistry here, we'll see the need to get beyond the campaign rhetoric and say, okay, we've got to get to grips with governance. And you can see they've got some smart people in that group. I've met many of them. I've got a lot of respect for these individuals who do these jobs, and they need support in telling that story. So that's one of the things my group has set out to do at ResourceWorks, is just gather that information. Where we see some gaps, we've commissioned research in the past, and we try to share that research and build awareness.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond-producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109-carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior. With a proven operator and finance team, GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, if they cancel Sightsee, will BC have an electricity shortage? Maybe not now, but in the not too distant future.
Yeah, the thing about Sightsee is that it's not, if it's on the current schedule, it's not going to be finished till 2024. And you'll find those who say, well, look at the forecasts. BC Hydro even says that we won't need it till maybe 2030. Now, we might need it before then. We might need it after then. It's pretty difficult to crystal ball that far in the future on things like energy demand, electricity demand. And if we say we're to cancel Sightsee now, we would come up to 2024. there wouldn't be a Site C, but we get to 2030, still with no Site C, and we didn't have it, we would very likely be looking at a shortfall. And by the time you get to 2030, here's one of the interesting things that I don't see discussed, but is really important, is that it's not just BC that's facing the challenge of transitioning to new and different forms of electricity production. It's all the people around us too. I recently was at a conference in Oregon, and we heard how Washington State is looking at what it would cost to transition their electricity grid to an all-renewable one based on wind and solar with natural gas as the kind of anchor, just in case there's no wind or there's no sunshine. You still need to have electricity. People aren't going to stop drying their hair because there's no electricity. At least they don't want to. So what would it cost in Washington State up to 2035 to do that transition? The number that was presented at this conference was pretty staggering. It was $106 billion Canadian. I translated it to Canadian, which is about $15,000 per person who lives in Washington State today. That's what it would cost to make that electricity transition. And I know there are lots of people, they look at Site C and they say, well, we don't need Site C, we just need the newest, latest technology. That will be easy, cheap, efficient to do. Well, I think that is, for the most part, wishful thinking right now. And I'm right in there with those who say, well, we should have that in future if we can. Oh, sure we should. But we don't have it right now. And if we defer decisions on things like Site C for 10 years or 15 years, we're going to find that the Washington states, the Albertas, Idaho, Oregon, California, all these places are going to have their own big problems with electricity demand. They're going to be needing electricity. They're going to be producing as much electricity as they can just to suit their domestic needs. So today, if we were short of electricity, we would be able to go out into the market and buy electricity from the Western North American spoke and hub supply. We could do that, and it wouldn't be that expensive. It would maybe not be desirable, but the trends that we're looking at right now would suggest that in 10 years, we won't have to do that. So if we're not taking steps today, when it's pretty inexpensive, relatively speaking, to build Site C, to ensure future energy sovereignty, we are probably looking at a very severe shortage and higher costs, which translates to a bigger hydro bill in your post box when we come down to these future transitions. So that's just one of the things. I don't hear that much talked about. What we hear about rather than that is, oh, don't worry, just throw a solar panel on it, throw a wind turbine on it, it'll be fine. Well, these systems are so complex, and the Site C decision was made by experts. It was tested for decades. It was subjected to reviews by all sorts of experts who said, do it. We don't know exactly what it's going to cost. We don't know exactly when the electricity will be needed, but just do it. Scores of experts signed off on that project, and it's really actually strange to see it dismissed by some as just this kind of spontaneous move to go and build a dam that no one wants. That nothing could be further than the truth, and I'm sure the NDP will quickly acknowledge that in government.
Well, isn't hydroelectric considered to be sustainable?
Well, I believe it is, and one of the things you'll hear at the margins is those saying, well, it's old technology. Why should we have old technology when we can have new technology? And I'm a little puzzled by that one, because if it's old and it works, one of the things I've got in my car are these round things connected to the axle, the very old technology known as wheels, and they turn around rather well. They're ancient technology. I think they were first done in stone. We've seen all the cartoons of the caveman, so I know they're pretty old. By the logic that I see applied to energy transition today, we should be getting rid of those things because they're old technology. I think we have to start asking more stringent questions about some of these easy assumptions that we can simply not have old technology. We should just go get some new technology because it's new and better. It's not necessarily better.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario. With grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold, a drill program will commence this spring to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork. For more information, visit our website, rmroyalty.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're chatting with Stewart Muir. Stewart, with the future coming up on us, of course, every second, Volvo says they've probably designed their last diesel engine, and starting in just 2 years, all the vehicles they'll produce will be either electric or hybrids. Will that just demonstrate the need for electrical production?
Well, electric cars do seem like a great thing, and there's probably going to be a lot more interest. We see governments in Canada that are creating programs to incentivize consumers to choose them. The fact is only 0.34% of our vehicles on the road today are electric. So there's a heck of a big upside for anyone getting into the electric vehicle business. But at the same time as that, there's just a very low present uptake. If we get Volvo, which markets, first into Europe, they are looking at countries like Norway that are mandating, greater speed into the electric vehicle space than other places. We look at quite a few countries in Europe where consumers pay double what we do in gasoline. So they have a lot of incentive that we don't have to adopt a different form of energy. But at the same time, an electric car, if you're thinking about it in terms of its green characteristics, in other words, what are the greenhouse gases and other impacts from driving that car, it's really only as good as the electricity. So if you're getting all your electricity from, say, a coal-fired electricity plant and putting that into your electric car, maybe there's no tailpipe emissions from you driving into the store, but you are contributing to, whatever's going into the air at the coal plant. If it's nuclear, well, if you're thinking about the whole 360 consequences of your actions, you've got to consider that. If it comes from, some other mix, whether it's diesel generation or, what have you, then that's a factor too. So it's not just the EV, it's how it's powered. But I think there's going to be a strong consumer appeal, but at the same time they're competing with the automobile industry that's been around for 120 odd years that is getting very, very good at continuing to innovate. Every year you get some new innovation. I was looking recently, there's at least half a dozen new areas of technology, whether it's capturing the heat from braking or heat from the exhaust that are making the conventional old-fashioned internal combustion engine more efficient. And, anyone who's driving a car now who used to drive a car years back knows every time they fill up their car that it's actually gotten to be, incredibly efficient how we use these cars because they use gasoline way more efficiently, but they're still very inefficient. And that's measured in the heat loss. You put your hand on your hood after you've driven your car, it's hot. That's wasted energy that you're feeling. And, if we can get to a point where you put your hand on your hood and it's cool, that means we've got super efficient internal combustion engines. If it's possible to do that, there's definitely people working on that. And at that point, it could be that an electric vehicle and an internal combustion vehicle are pretty comparable in terms of their usefulness in green.
Well, automotive experts I've talked to say the next 5 years we'll see more innovations in the automotive business than we've seen in the last 50 or 60 years.
Well, you think about it. All these technologies coming together, things that are, part of our everyday life, you start to put them together in new, interesting ways. The technology of materials, these nano materials, nanoparticles, and then the use of big data to have very refined understanding of trends that you can't otherwise see, but you can see it when you've got data. You can have the self-driving cars that are more efficient less wasted effort, safer. Boy, you put them all together, it is really a big jump that we're looking at, and it's definitely going to happen. It's already happening now. You get these new cars, never mind, just the EV, which is very exciting, but some of that technology that keeps you in your lane, or if you nod off, it knows, stuff like that. It's already out there. You go down to the showroom, it's there.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
My pleasure.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. If you have any questions for the show or our guests, they can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.